the chat function on the right-hand side. This is called a roundtable for a reason. We actually really appreciate feedback and questions that come up. One of the most greatest moments was when somebody made a comment and somebody else emailed me afterwards and said, hey, I really liked your comment. Would you mind connecting us in some way? So that was really cool as well. We want you guys to meet each other and network through this as much as possible. So we're delighted to have Michelle Berg back. We had Michelle back in April come and talk to us, and we're delighted with her presentation at that time. She is the CEO and leading lady of Elevated, an employee experience design agency. And Michelle and her team work alongside organizations to design people and culture programs that influence the way that team members work together. And during this pandemic, I know she's been super busy, not only in helping her clients with layoffs and programs like that, but also in really helping all of us. She's a deep thinker, a great presenter. And so please join me in welcoming Michelle to talk to us today about remote work.
Well, thank you so much. For those of you who joined us last time, I had a great co-presenter as well. Jill joining us was Jill Wilkie, and she's just been phenomenal. Even that, she and I didn't know each other beforehand, and now we've created and curated this really great remote friendship, which I think has been one of the nice stories of meeting people that you know, normally wouldn't have necessarily come into the fold. So it's been awesome, and I just again appreciate you so much, Dave, for asking me to be here and speaking. I am going to, I do a little bit differently this time. I do have a small presentation or a short presentation that I will do. So I'm going to just share my screen here. 1 second. Thank you. All right, so now you should be able to hear me. So just as a quick background, we have been supporting all sizes of companies. In the last 11 weeks, we've been through 2,600 layoffs. But what I think is a good news story is that we have started now, we've done, of those 700 have now been recalled. Like I said, this is being recorded. Dave, I've actually got it on my side. Interrupt me throughout this whole presentation or use the chat feature, that kind of a thing. Our basic philosophy, as you'll learn throughout this, is that we don't believe that work should suck for the employer or the employee. So we're very conscious about the programming that we build. And any of my philosophies that I give you here today, or the learnings that we've learned, is really centered around that. And last but not least, we're really big, and this has become even more important during building a remote work a remote work environment, is that being clear is being kind. In other words, no one can really read your mind. So you've got to make sure that you are communicating to them in a way that they hear you. Today's agenda is we're going to identify the challenges of working in a remote workforce. We'll understand the legal obligations. I've got tips for you to hold people accountable. The key is around connection, connection, connection. So we've got some ideas and thoughts around how you can continue to connect. And last but not least, future predictions and policy considerations that you might want to add or enhance organization. So the first question that we get is where we really are centered on is, what is the hard part of managing remote work? And here are the kind of the ideas that we've gotten from a lot of different people. First and foremost, working in silos and that loss of connection is certainly difficult at times. It can feel like you know, because they aren't next to you, as Dave said earlier, that you've lost where they're at. The next one is knowing what people are doing and measuring productivity. And again, just coming at it from how do you manage whether or not someone is productive? And especially now, not only are we managing a remote workforce, but one of the key considerations is the fact that we also have children in the home, or we have spouses in the home, or roommates, you know, that are also have to work from home, which in the pre-COVID times when people chose to work from home, they were still they could have still been in an isolated space. So I know even for myself as a business owner, having to make sure that my 5-year-old is doing the things that needs to be done from a school perspective, my productivity has certainly gone down. Or has it? Right? There's things like there's no longer drives to client sites. There's no longer, you know, just the chit chat that happens. But those are also the tough things around managing a remote workforce. I think another tough thing, as much as we're using Zoom right now or technology right now in video, still understanding body language and tone has become a challenge, or is a challenge. Understanding that people have different communication preferences come up even more so now that we are spending more time with technology. You know, I love very short, easy emails, and my team members on the flip side can sometimes assume that maybe, oh, is she angry because I'm just writing. My favorite email is yes period or no period, because then I can just move on. But understanding what that's like, and if I was in the office and just said yes or no, it would be completely different. So it certainly has put some strain on teams. I think too, for me, what I have found is because my team isn't here around me, often when I've identified project issues, or when there are issues with projects, there's almost this feeling that you get, especially when we're working in the office. So now it is taking way longer to identifying those issues, especially if, you know, the meeting cadence, or if your meetings with your team members has changed. Before, again, by walking through an office, you can tell if there's issues with certain people just by, you know, how they're looking at their monitor, and now you don't get to see that. So of course that's been really difficult in terms of remote work. And last but not least, my own leadership misjudgments have been really difficult. You know, even just, she didn't answer me as quickly as she used to answer me, what's going on? Well, again, it's things around empathy and communication and setting up cadence that becomes super important when you are managing a remote workforce. So these are the main things that we're hearing and seeing and sensing, which really begs the question, why are we talking about working from home still? So there's a couple of things here to consider. First and foremost, employment standards, WCB, Occupational Health and Safety, and Alberta Human Rights have all updated their policies around the work from home issues. So let's just take Alberta employment standards, for example, and I'm not sure, I know you said that this really did span across the different provinces. I am speaking specifically around Alberta right now, but for example, childcare. So if someone they actually have job protected leave right now. So that's why working from home may still continue to be an issue. WCB in Alberta anyways just came out with that the organization can actually be held liable, and it will be considered, it could be considered, not will, but it could be considered if someone gets COVID at your office, that they would be eligible then for WCB if you're paying into WCB premiums. This, of course, is a whole new can of worms that's being opened up right now as well. And so what that looks like. But again, if you allow issues of you having to pay someone's salary during that time. Occupational Health and Safety has also said, you know, you've got to have a good hazards assessment, and you've got to have your OHS reps up to speed on what that hazard assessment looks like. And again, if you're not putting the proper protocols in place to keep people safe, you will be on the hook for that. And last but not least, Alberta Human Rights has been updated to say you cannot let somebody go if they're sick, or if they get, you know, COVID that's one, but two, it's also, they've already updated things around, again, discrimination and discriminative practices as it relates to even someone's origin, as it relates to COVID, because we are seeing quite a few human rights cases come to light. So, you know, from all of those places, just knowing all of that, work from home still is going to continue to be that option. And then for those that are talking about re-entry, you know, there's the building realities. Do you know what the cleaning protocols are? Do you know how easy it is going to be to get into an elevator? For those offices downtown that are open, they all have a 1 person per elevator. And how long is this going to last? And can you imagine, everyone gets there at 8 o'clock in the morning, how long it will take for everyone to get to the floor that they're supposed to be at, considering there is this 1 person per elevator rule. And then there's the actual office realities as well. So we were actually building our work from home policy at Elevated about, or sorry, not our work from home, our re-entry policy team to help us build it together. And because very much we all want to be back together. There is definitely a desire from a mental health perspective as well to be back in an office, just to have some normalcy back in our lives. But we started talking about who cleans and when. Down to like, what about whiteboard markers and printers and photocopiers, and you know, making sure that we have the right PPE for us. Do we need masks? Well, we weren't sure if we needed masks because our offices were large, but on the flip side, you know, just making sure that you've got the right amount of alcohol-based, like hygienic hand sanitizer, in addition to wipes. But then we were like, okay, so if you go into the fridge, who's responsible for wiping that down? And, you know, on one case, we had said, well, no, we're all responsible, we're all adults. But when we really got into the nitty gritty of it, I looked at the team and said, do you think that the time efficiency that's going to be lost here is going to be worth it to come back to the office if we are going to be paranoid about, did we clean that and did we touch that? Washrooms, you know, we don't have any knowledge of how often are the washrooms cleaned, and they are publicly shared with multiple other companies. And then, of course, the same in the office realities, you still have to talk about keeping your 2 meters distance. And some of us are more so in that open environment. We could keep the 2 meter distance, but what does that look like? Do we need to put stuff on the floors? Lunchroom shutdowns, boardrooms are shut down. You know, you can have more than 15 people in your office at a time. It wasn't related to offices, but they still said you still need to be mindful of being able to keep 2 meters apart. So lunchrooms and boardrooms, that starts to get difficult. And then, of course, you know, working from home offers a couple of additional benefits, from cost savings to travel. And if you think about it, now you can recruit all over, you know, all over the world, if you will, to get the best talent. If you've learned how to work from home, you don't have to have someone who's just staring at you in your office either. So there's certainly some cost savings even with that. So that's where, you know, so many people are talking about re-entry. I will tell you, re-entry is the #1 busiest thing that we are doing right now. And yet when it gets to these policies, when it gets to OHS and the liability from a WCB perspective, a lot of people are making the decision of going, maybe we should just, you know, continue to work from home. So with that being said, the tips to manage remote workers really begins with trust. That's #1. And so what happens is you have to default to transparency. You have to be a lot more open about what it is that you're doing and stop knowledge hoarding. You know, as much as you think you know each other in an office environment, trust is really built on by really getting to know each other in different ways. And then, of course, it comes down to setting clear expectations and actually sticking to them. So what we're seeing, a lot of companies that we're working with, is they'll have a really great goal setting program that they had internally when they weren't working from home. And now that they are working from home, they've kind of let all their goal setting and all the accountabilities kind of, well, we'll deal with that later. And realistically, you need that more than ever from a structure perspective. That's how remote work really works. And last but not least, it really is focusing on output, not time in seat, which has been, you know, a big thing that we've talked about for a long time. We're huge believers, and again, it's about the result and not necessarily how you got there, but that result being met by a deadline is what's super important. So one of the things that we say and challenge managers to do is have I done a competency review? So in other words, is it a behavioral issue or is it a skill set issue? And as a manager and as a leader, I'm a huge believer in I get what I give. So I need to take the time to also understand their priorities, understand what's going on for them, and making sure that whatever communication cadence that I set, I have set that. And last but not least, trust is formed through vulnerability. So even talking about your own challenges that you're having right now working from home, especially if, you know, if some of you don't like it, which many of us don't, but being vulnerable and transparent and even sharing habits that you formed to help you be more productive at home is important. And one of the last things that we often do is from a team charter perspective, is we actually get teams to identify commitments from each person on what they're going to do and how they're going to contribute to working remotely. And what this does is when people put down or write down what they're committed to, they can find that they're actually going to hit those results and that you all achieve the results that you're looking for. But again, all of managing remote workers really starts from trust. If you don't have trust, it gets really difficult to manage remote workers. The next step that we talk about is setting boundaries for them and yourself. I think when we talk about burnout and mental wellness, the truth is when I wake up, I'm opening up my laptop, first thing I do, even before getting coffee, see what's there. And it's the last thing I do. I put that away and realistically now my workday has certainly begun, you know, is way too long, and that is going to contribute to burnout. So if you talk to them about hours of work and when you're going to be working at Elevated, and many of our clients as well, we've put in what we call daily priorities or daily check-ins. So in the morning, here are the key things that I need to get done today. And then at the same time, we do then the checkout. Some pushback that we've received is it feels micromanaging, and it's not. It's defaulting back to transparency to build trust. If I know what it is that you're working on and I can see it all in a quick snapshot, and what we do is we use Slack, and we've built a channel for check-ins and checkouts. What did I get done today? Or what will I get done today? What did I get done today? And what that does is it really, again, allows them to know when to focus on my work versus not. The other big thing that we recommend too from a remote work is don't just, you know, identify a space in your home that is just for work. Don't just start working right even in your bed. But those are different things to really talk about, again, from a boundary perspective. And then we also encourage you to set recurring meetings with your team members as well. Again, we have one-on-one meeting with everyone at Elevated, and then we have one team meeting every week. Every week we have one-on-one, and every week we have a full team meeting. At least we're connecting twice, and then of course we connect throughout the day as well. But those meetings are really for them and to check in. And again, that allows for those boundaries of talking about what's going on for them, and they get that time from me as well. It can seem like a lot, but honestly, it's been probably the best thing. And again, as a leader, I've got to commit to making sure that I actually follow through on those meetings as well. But that's what really the boundary side of it is. The other tip that we really do recommend is tracking time. And quite honestly, it's been two of the issues that we've had so far, specifically around overtime. So just because you're working at home, you still are bound to your overtime hours. So if employees that are eligible for overtime are working more than 8 hours or are allowing their time to get away from them, you need to make sure that there's some really good policies in place that protect, again, both the employee and the employer around their work. And again, it's going to be a little bit different. If I'm going to take an hour and a half to go make sure that my 5-year-old again is doing her schoolwork, that's an hour and a half break. So realistically, what a lot of organizations are doing are tracking that time and then submitting them regularly. And from a legal perspective, the organization is then also protected because you have a good time tracking measure in place. And honestly, what I will say about tracking time too is when I'm tracking it, you can't really get a hold of or ahead of your time management if you don't know where you're spending your time. And so what I have found is in the process of time tracking, I actually get a better handle on when I am most productive, least productive. And so it actually enhances my own time management. It can feel like it is micromanagement in a way. But again, when I'm defaulting to transparency, then I want to be sharing what it is that I'm doing. And that goes back to the type of culture that it is that you're trying to build. Video chats are honestly, they definitely help with that tone and body language. In the beginning, I think there was a lot of hesitation around people actually going on video chats. They didn't like the way that they looked, but we actually have really worked with organizations to come up with video chat do's and don'ts. You know, unfortunately, we've seen naked people in the back walk by on video chats. And so being mindful again of what that's like. But also we encourage our team members to get dressed for the way they would for work. And a lot of people I think assume, oh, well, I'm at home, I can just be in my pajamas. And I'll admit there are days that I am business on top and party, on bottom, because this is the only part that somebody can see. I call it my workplace mullet. But at the same time, I'm still presentable. And those are things that, you want to make sure with the video chat, because tone does change. And when you get to see people, and that's a good thing. But on the flip side right now, we also are encouraging you to change things up. We are seeing something called Zoom fatigue. It's very real. The lag that occurs in watching yourself all day long as well has really, I think is starting to impact, or we've noticed an impact with a lot of our clients around that. And even for myself, changing between a Zoom meeting as well as a phone meeting, it's nice to have that change up too, but still really committing when it is a video that you are all present. Again, setting up that team charter around what it is that you do for video chats is really important. Nothing worse than, again, somebody not paying attention. And when you don't turn on your video, I find that paying attention becomes even more so. But again, there's bandwidth challenges, so that's why a lot of people do want to turn it off. But so again, it's talking to them about and setting those expectations. And then, of course, managing remote workers, using check-in questions become even more important as well. And we do ask things like, how's your mental health? But we also ask, what are you grateful for today? And what can you control today? This is more of an issue that we're sensing, obviously, more so through COVID. But remote workers can feel really detached at times, even when there's an office over here, and then now we're sitting here and someone's working from home. That detachment can lead to more of, they're just not feeling as connected. And so mental health for remote workers is definitely something that we need to be mindful of at all times. And you can, when we talk about helping them, there are ways that we can certainly help and support mental health through all of this too. And then last, as well, communication. As leaders, we need to be the example. So continuously sending out emails, again, it can become so easy just to fall into your silo and be all to yourself. So we always say at most daily or at least weekly, but celebrating about the wins, figuring out ways to recognize, making sure that you're still capitalizing on all those things, and really focusing and honing in on that connection piece will certainly help to manage remote workers. And it supports, again, that transparency perspective as well. So technologies that we love and that we use, from a video chat, we use Zoom, but some of our organizations use Skype, Teams, and those that don't even have either technically use Google and FaceTime. And then I just got a question here. So Are there learnings from organizations who have always been remote? I'm thinking of companies that are global and spread out geographically. I mean, when I talk about these things and these tips, that's who actually, I mean, remote work's been around for a long time. There are a lot of organizations who certainly have, have gotten it. I'm going to talk about policy changes and things that they've had to consider that might help this question as well. And we'll go. So yeah, but thanks for asking questions. You can continue to ask questions at any time. So again, technologies that we've seen, those organizations that can't afford the Skype or the Teams or the Zoom, we're still seeing even just the simplicity of FaceTime making a big difference as well. And similarly, like regular chat is, and for transparency in particular, Slack certainly helps that. And then in terms of company updates, we're huge fans of Bamboo HR, where they send out communication. You can send out communications to everyone, but again, emails works just as simple as well. But again, remembering to use and capitalize on the technologies when you're not used to working from home, it's something that you have to be conscious of. It's a mindfulness that you realistically have to just be reminding yourself so that you can form those habits as well. So some connection time ideas, and these again, we have learned from other teams that have worked remote. We are certainly seeing, dance parties and karaoke parties as a way to connect with team members. One of my favorite stories, and I think Jill might have told it at the last one, is that one of her partners, or one of the partners used to be super scary and no one wanted to talk to him. And he's now leading the meditation part of every morning. They wake up, they do this meditation with him now, and that's something that they're going to continue even if they talk about re-entry. But so getting up together and doing some sort of exercise together has certainly helped, again, connect people. We certainly, ATB talks about this a lot, but they do coffee talk. So it's basically water cooler simulation. And anytime you want to go have a chat, their main leaders are getting together, and they're on Google Hangouts at ATB, for example, but they're there, and anyone wants to ask a question or just chit chat, they're welcome to do it. And they set that time up at a specific time, and they know, and it's not about work. It is, again, it's trying to simulate that water cooler type of environment. We've seen tours of each other's homes. So like MTV Cribs is one of those things that we often see. We ask what's in your fridge and that kind of a thing. Although very interesting, out of the US now, there was a recent case around that we also have to be careful around microaggressions, whereas it can feel really bad to see, you normally would have never seen someone's home, so people can feel discriminated against or feel alienated when someone's home doesn't look like someone else's. So and of course, I mean, in the US things are far more litigious, but I always say that we start to follow. But again, we're seeing lots of tours of people's homes. And then one of my favorite too to get to know each other is, again, either through a Slack channel or otherwise, you randomly generate questions and ask questions about, best concert you've gone to, what are your biggest fears? The one that even we've done recently is like, where are you traveling to first? And the answers have been surprising. And so what's really interesting around all of this is, like I say, what is really getting to know your team and building trust on a completely different level. In some cases, it feels like we have less time, and in other cases, it feels like we have even more time. So as we continue to kind of get ready from either re-entry or work from home, the biggest policy considerations that we're seeing come up is from an occupational health and safety perspective. And more specifically, if you're going to not follow through on the protocols at work, what are you going to do on the other side? What are you going to allow? And again, from an occupational health and safety perspective from work from home, you do still have an obligation to make sure that people are even safe at home, even though it is at their home. And so even asking the questions of, are you set up right ergonomically? You know, I know, again, lots of organizations have been contracting ergonomics consultants, and they're doing them all through Zoom, which can be difficult as well. But they are, but because an organization is on the hook for if there is an injury of some sort, you've got to make sure that employees know what tools and what access that they have. And if they aren't following it, do they understand what the ramifications are, either from work or re-entry? Sick time policies, you know, we're hearing that a minimum of 5 days or 2% of earnings is going to have to be paid by organizations. So if you're not already offering that as a minimum, but what does that look like from home? Right? Are people still gonna, you know, if they're working from home, do they take the full sick day? I know one of the organizations that we work with has put in a tier 1 sickness, a tier 2 sickness, and a tier 3 sickness to determine the severity of it and what that means and how you can still work. You know, tier 1 is realistically just that cold, but I can still do my job. Tier 2 is where I've actually got the flu, or I'm flat out, or I can't even look at my computer anymore. But again, I think that there is definitely this fear of, well, if they're at home, how do we know that they're really sick? The other time around sick time policies, or the other thing is doctor's notes. Are they going to be needed still, especially if you're allowed to work from home now or not? And again, doctors don't actually want to be providing them. And in the case of COVID, they weren't providing them. It wasn't even part of the legislation. So these are all policy considerations. Accounting for time. So again, making sure that you're good at accounting for time, specifically when you're working at home. And what does that look like? And how do you manage productivity? The other side, working from home, major policy considerations that are coming up are around IT updates. So your VPNs or security. One of our clients has actually just been hit so badly that their whole thing, they're now on so they got hit on Monday. And as of today, they are still not back to work because of a security breach that has happened. They've been attacked. And so and working from home, you become even more susceptible. So what are your requirements on computers going to be, and home computers and that kind of a thing? You've got to be thinking about, and how are you going to make sure that those updates are always done? I know for myself, I often turn the updates off. So again, that comes back to a non-compliance issue. How are you going to check for it? What are you going to do? How are you going to follow through? Don't just have a policy for the sake of having a policy, but know also what your actions are going to be. The other side of it too is from a privacy perspective. There's a thing called clean desk policy. In one of our organizations, which is a major telecommunications organization here throughout North America, working from home, their clients actually request that they have a clean desk policy, meaning at the end of each day, there can be nothing left on their desk because it's an at-home office. This is the way that they can work from home. There are other people that are in the home as well. So they have to, in the beginning anyways, just to prove compliance, they used to have to take a picture of their desk at the end of each day and submit it. They've since laxed it, but that was one of the ways, again, that they got them into the habit to making sure that nothing confidential was left on the desk, because again, even a spouse could see something. So you've got to consider, what are you doing from a privacy perspective? So future work considerations, as well, as we wrap up here, you know, we believe and we know open concept offices won't be so open. We work with 2 interior designers, and they are crazy busy with recreating what that open space looks like. We are seeing already the return of cubicles or partitions. Some have been glass partitions that they've put into place or that they're getting ready for. Some are those plastic but see-through as well. You know, again, considering the fact that you've got to maintain a legal requirement from occupational health and safety, you've got to maintain a 2-meter space. If you can't do that, at least there's partitions in order to do that. The other big thing that we're seeing from a future work consideration is business travel. And will there be a requirement of self-isolation? Right now there is, but what are your policies going to be? And under what circumstances will you require business travel now as well? Will it be the same, and for what reasons? And knowing that business travel is about to get a whole lot more expensive, we also know, from an airline perspective, that it continues to be difficult. So again, thinking around that for policies. Networking is a question that we are getting asked about all the time. And what should we consider, and what should we do as it relates to lunches and taking clients out for lunch, going to conferences, going to events? We know that major conferences and events are probably going to be put on hold, but what will they look like, and what are we going to support as an organization? That's all changing. Thermal scanning is one of the biggest questions that we are getting right now, of allowing, and again, this isn't necessarily a work from home, but if you have to implement thermal scanning, or if you want to implement thermal scanning, the key around that is it's going to be a new job for whomever's doing it. You have to train them the right way. And again, from a privacy legislation perspective, you're going to have to understand why you're doing the thermal scanning, and what information are you keeping, and for what reason are you keeping it. So a large organization here in Calgary as well was going through all of this, and it was the thermal scanning that made them realize, you know what, again, we're just going to continue to work from home, because the amount of time and energy and implementation that it would take to actually implement something like that. And they felt, in their environment anyways, they felt that thermal scanning was going to be needed to support some of the hazards, that they have now decided working from home is going to continue. And then last but not least is productivity monitoring. And I myself feel, every time a client asks me about this, I have the heebie-jeebies, but there is keystroke analyzing. They're recording all calls just to measure. They know when you're on Facebook, they know, and I personally struggle with it, but it is becoming more and more. And there was actually a debate on LinkedIn just yesterday, I think, or the day before, around actually what's wrong with it. If you want to default to transparency, shouldn't you be showing everyone what you're doing all the time? And I just feel like I don't have the time myself to be looking in or listening to phone calls, or to be looking in on what they're doing. I'm going to set the result, and I don't care how they're going to get there. If they get there, that's what I'm going to focus on as a leader. But certainly this is big business right now. There's lots being invested into productivity monitoring and what that's looking like. I've heard of organizations having cameras have to be on from 8 until 5. And so they know when people are there or not. And again, to me, that is not going to be a competitive advantage. But again, if you're struggling at trusting, and you're struggling at believing or setting results and knowing what those results are, productivity monitoring is certainly an option. So that's kind of the formal part of today. What I loved about this last time anyways was the fact that we were able to, we shared so much in terms of the chat and asked lots of questions. So there's one question up here from Alex right out of the gate. Could you clarify current self-isolation requirements after business travel? So currently it is still, if you're going anywhere outside of the country, it's a self-isolation of 14 days. What seems to be a little bit gray is province to province. So if you go to Manitoba, and from a different province, or if you're in it, it's actually 10 days that you have to be self-isolated for if you've traveled anywhere else in the country. Coming back to Alberta, it only seems to be that you need to self-isolate if there are symptoms. So you can dictate, though, right now what you want your self-isolation to be within your organization. Yeah, so again, it's provincially related. I've got a private question here. What are the limits on employers' responsibility for workplace safety in employees' homes? Well, so again, when it comes down to occupational health and safety, they're looking to make sure that you have given the employee information around the hazard, and what hazards may, and to do their own hazard assessment within their home. So a hazard can be, again, an improper chair. A hazard could be a video camera that doesn't, or a laptop that, you know, has constant strain. And then, so what occupational health and safety is looking for is, are you giving them tools or tips or ways of staying safe? So they could, what I will say is, if they feel that they are in an unsafe environment, I haven't seen this yet, but the liability there is that they could make a complaint that they don't feel safe working from home because they haven't been given equipment that allows to be ergonomically safe. Again, I haven't seen that to date, but technically the way the code is written, that's where the liability comes into place. So again, it's giving them the tools to do their own workplace assessment, and do a hazards assessment. And then the next step from an occupational health and safety perspective is, what are you doing to support them? Very similar to if you were asking them to come to the office, what protocols are you putting in place so that they are safe? From a future work consideration, specific to cost savings considerations, are you seeing your clients reducing weekly work hours, doing wage freezes or pay cuts, reducing professional development funds? Yeah. So from a cost savings consideration, the majority of what's happening isn't really related to re-entry or I guess, or future work. I think what a lot of people have done, so we've seen reductions or just total disappearance of RRSP contributions. We have seen you know, the weekly work hours have certainly been reduced anywhere between 10 to 30%. And there are constructive dismissal issues around that we are starting to see some major constructive dismissals coming up. We knew that was going to happen. Again, I think it was Jill had said it on the call last time, Taylor Johns, I will say the law firm because it's everyone can see, they're saying, have you had your salary reduced? There's a big billboard up on McLeod Trail. Have you seen your billboard reduced, or were you temporarily laid off? You are subject to, you may be subject to a severance, you know, so there, and that is of course the very first one that we did see was someone from being supported from Taylor Johns on that. So but we are seeing, yeah, we're actually not seeing quite the reduction on training, and here's why. A lot of the training programs have gone to remote, and this is actually working from home is a good time to do training. And so we're seeing reduced costs, like training companies are reducing their costs, and in addition to that, the training grant is still available. So we are actually seeing more people capitalize on training than taking that out. And then again, wage freezes for sure. Most of our organizations have talked about wage freezes as well. So hopefully, I mean, the possibilities are endless. We've seen changes to benefits plans. We've also been very thankful to benefit providers who have reduced their premiums as well. For example, with dental, when you couldn't go to the dentist or massage and that kind of a thing, we've seen Sun Life anyways be very proactive in just giving us those decreases. So those are all ways in terms of cost savings. I've got another question here on any info on how to monitor, confirm that employees are wearing masks safely while out in the field. We have sent out an info sheet from AHS, so would that be okay as a CYA with regards to WCB OHS programs? Or yeah, I mean, that is good. I think that one of the things that we said, we've actually seen one of our companies had to do a course on how to properly wear a mask and what is not okay versus what is okay. And it seems ridiculous, but you know, at the end of the day, we were finding so many people wearing their masks either at their chin or just under their nose, which actually really negates the whole thing. We've seen courses on even just not touching your face, which I have this in major infliction. I consistently touch my face. And then we have also have just seen like quick, the spot checks are video checks just with their phones through FaceTime. But again, it starts with a culture and building a culture of A, accountability, and B, what is non-compliance going to be. So having that consequence put in place has also been really important around mask wearing. And again, specifically, because here's the thing that WCB says is, that if they are around, they won't all be considered WCB cases, but if there's a mass breakout in your organization, that would be eligible for WCB. And then in addition to that is if they're around the general public, and that's why they should be wearing PPE as well. Now, masks don't necessarily protect you from getting it, they protect you from giving it to someone else. But you have to create a culture and I would say even recognize a culture for doing something right, as well as having the consequences for doing something wrong. Have you seen any provisions in working from home policies relating to working alone, i.e. working alone check-in procedures, given that you are now working alone remotely instead of surrounded by a team at the office? We haven't seen any policy provisions, so but I would expect that might be something smart to do. What we have done, and this was more so around the layoff perspectives, is we've built a product or a program called Wellness Checks. And what we've been doing on a more regular basis is checking in with employees. And in this case, they were those that were temporarily laid off. And it was just to make sure that you're okay. And we're seeing that being translated now into the same way with people just saying, hey, how's it going? Are you feeling supported? Are you feeling set up? You know, in terms of, we get that you're by yourself, and when you're by yourself and you're isolating like that, it's the wellness, that's the mental wellness side that we see a bigger issue. So I haven't seen any policies or provisions changing for it, but I have seen more practices in that we're doing more check-ins formally. And we're seeing that HR is taking a big piece of that, but we still always recommend that the leaders should be reaching out as well, and that's where those daily check-ins would be good. If employees do not have childcare but physically need to be in the office to perform their job, such as a dental hygienist, can they legally be laid off? No, they cannot legally be laid off. They are eligible for job protected leave. So they can still go collect EI, but you cannot lay them off. What job protected leave means is that, and this is indefinite, set out by the Alberta government as well. And what this means is they still have to have a job when they are able to come back, when they can get the child care. So but you are not, during that time, you should not be letting them go from a legal perspective. Anyone else have any questions? That's all I've got in my chat.
Yeah, well, we're almost at the end of our time anyway, so I think that's good. It's interesting seeing, I know in the last couple years, we've seen all of the major insurers like Manulife, Sun Life, Great West, now Canada Life, have all moved to this, they call it a European workplace, where you come into a big wide open floor, they just have desks set up and you just choose your spot for the day, and there's no real personal desk. They just all moved to that, and now it's going to be just really interesting to see what that looks like in the future. But I think they were also having a lot of people working from home, so it might just be a bit of the new way of doing it. But one quick update on the benefit side of things. Still, if you have employees who are taking wage rollbacks for a limited period of time, I know a lot of executives and leaders are doing this right now. reduced work hours. What the insurers are saying to do is not, like, say you have a 20-hour eligibility for benefits, but right now somebody's only working 15 because of COVID. The insurers are saying just pretend they're not doing that, pretend they're still working their 20, keep them on benefits. If it ends up going on and on, then you will have to eventually move them off benefits. But for now, don't worry about that. As well as if their earnings are reduced, which would impact their long-term disability, short-term disability, and life insurance payouts. They're saying keep paying premium on the pre-COVID volume. And if they should have a claim during this time, they would continue to pay the claims based on pre-COVID earnings. Again, if it goes on and on, we may have to revisit that at some point. The other thing is we had premium credits from all of the insurers for April. They were different by insurer, but for instance, with Sun Life, it was 50% of dental premiums. With health, it was 10%. They all have a little bit of a different formula. That was for April. They're now all scrambling to get word out that it's for May as well. So they'll just continue to watch that. But we are seeing dental offices set to reopen on a limited basis. We're seeing massage therapy and things like that kind of being planned for. So we may not see too many more months of this. But it's been really interesting on our month-to-month chart just to be able to see in April just zero dental claims on a lot of our plans. That will, that will survive on the chart for years, and we'll look back on it as being our COVID time. So if there's no other questions, I'll say thank you to Michelle. Thank you to everybody else for your time and attention today. We really do. You're welcome. And there's the recording of this presentation will be on our website shortly. The Michael Kerr presentation from last week is now up on our website. If you go to hillcrest-financial.com, you'll see it under the Insights link. Just click on that. We figured out how to do YouTube and get that all set up. So that was a major accomplishment for Hillcrest this week. Also, we're going to take next week off, but the week after that, so June 4th, we're going to have Jane Helbrecht, who is a partner at Acuity Partners in Winnipeg. She's going to come and talk to us about building and maintaining a strong workplace culture through discussing the 6 things that you think impact a strong, engaged workplace but don't, and the 1 thing that does. So fairly provocative blurb there, and it will be reflective of the COVID time as well. This would be a good one for you to invite your leadership team to. So probably around May 29th, we'll send out the invitation for that. Okay, so last week, we gave away some books and also our world famous Hillcrest socks. And that was actually a big hit, the books for sure. We were a little bit overwhelmed by the interest and emails we got. So today I only have 2 books to give away. It is the Essential Retirement Guide by Frederick Batteste. This is, and at the bottom it says, A Contrarian's Perspective. This is the best book I've ever read on retirement. I highly recommend it. Unfortunately, I only have 2 left. And they will come with the Hillcrest socks as well. I think we have a bit of time, so I'll tell you an interesting story on the Hillcrest socks. They came from Italy. We worked through Friday Sock Company here in Calgary, wonderful company. When they first came, they were the wrong color, and it was really subtle. Like I couldn't even tell. But the fellow at Friday Sock wasn't satisfied with them, so he said, "I'm going to reorder. We're going to get this right." And he said, "What do you want me to do with the socks?" So we ended up giving them to the drop-in center. So these are really popular in downtown Calgary. And if you want to fit in with the crowd down here, you need to get these socks. So they come with the book. You can't say no, but you can give them away if you don't want them. Please keep sending us your topics of speakers that you'd like us to host. Again, we're not wanting to put out a lot of fluff. We need to know that we're not wasting people's time. So we're only going to do presentations when we have something of substance to talk about. But the last few actually have been direct topics and speakers that you have asked for. So keep those coming and we'll keep trying to provide the service. Thanks again to Michelle. Thank you to all of you. Appreciate seeing you here and have a great week.
Thank you.